My name is Leahcim Semaj, and this is part 2. Anti-vaxxers can be converted, and our lives depend on this. Part 1, we outlined the various biases that are preventing individuals from making the transformation required. In part 2, we're going to give some ways in which we approach the transformation necessary. Now, there is bias and there's something called evidence. You can't change an anti-vax person's attitude or behavior by providing them scientific evidence. It doesn't work. Providing them evidence is something that is like water off a duck's back. Although it is tempting to keep repeating the evidence, that the problem is not these people's lack of evidence or even education to understand the evidence. That's not it. Continuing repeating risk you have been considered irrelevant. There's a boomerang effect, and it actually increases their resistance. So the more you repeat the evidence, the more varied you make the evidence, is the greater their resistance. So other ways have to be found, and they have to be dealt with differently and specifically. There's a thing called explanation, but there's also something called explication. An explanation is essentially tailored to the listener, to the reader, to their need to understand, while an explication is mere setting forth the finer details. Big difference between explanation and explication. Explication, the finer details. You break it down, you go within the issue. Explications don't work. The vaccine resistance are engaged in a form of motivated reasoning and cognitive bias that leads them to selectively interpret data and other information. Very selective in their interpretation. Presenting a realm of statistics is an approach destined to fail. The more you push, the more you press, is the more they resist. You need to get to the source of the person's motivated reasoning and the cognitive bias, which is specific to them, if you have to have any hope of changing their mind. So then you can see why the method we use, the approach, is quite different. If you're approaching a family member versus a friend, an employee versus a stranger, a co-worker versus somebody in your community. We have to tailor the approaches to get within, around, to circumvent the cognitive bias that is in place. Oftentimes, people don't have enough time to figure out exactly what is required of them. Because the reality is very there, folks. You can give a person knowledge, but you can't make them think. For some, it's convenient to remain fools because accepting the truth with them requires for them to change. But they already defined a persona which is attached to a particular bias, and they will feel almost stupid, even when the evidence is overwhelming, that they are now to change. The strongest predictor of all the biases is the conspiratorial bias, because that one probably takes up 40 to 50% of the variance. There's a conspiracy afoot. There's a conspiracy out there. Corrective information and myth busting about vaccination has tended to be either ineffective or counterproductive. Every evidence you put, no, we have heard that before, that's false. That's fake news. That's false. We have seen other information that can counter that. You may still feel that personality and social attitudes remain important. Perhaps you can explain some of the strong anger and outrage you hear when you try to convince such individuals, because they believe that they have all the evidence. And the more evidence you give them counter to that, it means that you are providing false information. It strengthens their resistance. Now, Conspiracy theories, they abound out there. And it is almost impossible for you to debunk them because they are intended to be based on something that is not provable. You accept it to be true or not. Remember that this individual takes pieces of facts, 1, 2, 3, some of them unrelated, but string them all together. But the key thing is that they mix it with their own secret sauce. Now, you have to accept that secret sauce in order for you to understand this. And we have to confront these things, but not in the direct manner that has been done to a large extent. No. You can fix what you don't face. Closing your eyes won't make it go away. Some of these individuals, they are locked in their own world. And we have to find very individualized, very specific measures as a function of where this individual is, what kind of bias this individual is locked into. Now, sometimes it's evident, it's quite clear, but sometimes you have to have a conversation with this individual. Don't be alarmed that it doesn't happen just one time. Change is a process. You can give a person knowledge, but you can't make them think. Some people want to remain fools. Some people want to hold on to this because it gives them connection with a particular group that you may not even be aware of. So the approach to this process can be broken down into a number of steps. Step 1, listen. And I think to a large extent, we have not been doing enough listening to what the anti-vaxxers are telling us. What are they saying? The closer you listen, the more you'll hear which of the biases are at work so that you can target your transformation to get around that bias. Step 2, how do you get past that conspiratorial mindset? Because indeed, it is one of the largest that tend to override all the others. Rather than fight it, believe it or not, you need to join in with it. Make the argument that the vested interest can conspire to obscure the benefits of vaccination and exaggerate the danger. But yeah, you're right, it could be so. All that is quite plausible. But maybe there's a way we can get them to inch them, just nudge them out of it. The best example I have to share with you is a concept called the jet-propelled couch. There's a wonderful book that goes back to the 1950s called, 50-Minute Hour. And in that book, a number of classic psychiatric cases are explored. One that stuck in my mind from my student days, the jet-propelled couch, is a true story about a physicist who thought he was a science fiction hero from another planet. He had actually spent so much time creating this other world and the other worldview possibility that ultimately he decided to unknowingly join them. And he had spent so much time in that world that he now could not come back out of it. To cut a long story short, what the psychiatrist did, after trying everything, he inadvertently decided to start talking the language of the other planet. Join the person in the insanity. Join the person, and as he joined him and over time started talking to him in the language of that, the person was going to ask him if you're crazy. The person was able to see themselves and to see the fallacy and the stupidity of what they were conceptualizing. So we're saying that we have to learn variations of this to join the conspiracy theorists with the intention of slowly nudging them out of it, give them a chance to hear and see the fallacy of the belief structure. Sometimes they say smaller and simpler and gentler. subtle ways of doing this, that how you get them out. Einstein says that any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. So to gently engage, explore, and then nudge the individual and together walk back out of the bias. It works. Step 3, explore the other biases. Look at them all. You can now move to see how the other factors work. Point out to the conformists that going along with the anti-vax movement, you are just being, you're conforming. But is it wrong to conform? What is you conform to? You wear clothes when people wear clothes? Huh? You drive on the left when people drive on the left. You drive on the right when people drive on the right. Are there areas of conformity that allow us to be able to coexist on this planet? What about the individualist? Can you point out how, again, if you decide to drive on the left when everyone is driving on the right, how is that going to work? Huh? If you're going to wear a bathing suit when you're going to the court, you have a case in court and you just feel it's a hot day, so you want to just wear what you want to wear because it's important for you to please yourself. Could that cause a problem? And we can look at scenarios where individuality, even though it is lauded and accepted, but it creates all kinds of problems. And then you gently look at it and you move it in terms of how the impact of the virus can be seen in a similar light. What about those who are afraid of needles? Once we get it down and we get them to admit that this is really the problem, you know, then maybe we can find some other ways of getting around this. I do believe that it's one of the harder ones to get people to admit to, because remember that this is something that is deep-seated and probably goes all the way back. But let's hopefully that with time, an oral vaccine will be developed. But then you can imagine then the choice of 1 versus 2 sticks would make a big difference to this individual. Other ways in which we can look at this? I usually like to ask people who are committing themselves to the red pill, what's your plan B? What's the alternative? Now ask them whether, what else would they do? Let's say your plan is wrong. What's the backup? Your plan for being hospitalized for a couple of days, for a couple of weeks? Have you thought about the ventilator? Have you seen the impact of the ventilator? Do you know the data of ventilators? Now, once you go on, it's a 50-50 chance that you get no. Can you even discuss with them? I mean, again, the plan B. What are we seeing now in terms of what people who are on their deathbed as a result of making decisions which was not supporting of life? The kind of regrets in the decisions. So again, I found one of my most useful approaches, getting persons to explore the plan B. Yes, let's go along with your plan, but what's the plan B? If this doesn't work, what you gonna do? So you see, what we're talking about is a form of mental jiu-jitsu. The idea is that you tailor your intervention not in a specific sameness for everyone, but you try first of all to understand the underlying motivation, the cognitive bias that is in place. Align yourself with the individual's bias as much as possible, so you almost start sounding like a co-conspirator, sounding like a believer, but then you gently start helping them to find a way out and share the path with them. Once you identify the factor that is most at work, most prominent in the individual's life, you are now halfway there. And then you start talking about us. Now, what if we now decide to do it together? What if we now decide to try a different thing? What else could we do? This is actual jiu-jitsu. You take the person off guard, and you can also help lower the temperature of the interaction around this tough topic. You see, we understand that behavior can be changed. You may feel frustrated, you may feel angry, even defeated after an argument with an anti-vax person. You may believe that nothing will change their mind other than getting the disease themselves. But one thing for sure, we have come to realize that when the seeds of change are planted, you never know the gestation period. For some people, they will get it immediately. Others, it may take hours, it may take days, it may take weeks, months. Let's hope it won't take years. But let's hope that we are able to get enough to the point where we are still able to get to herd immunity. So over time, the others will be able to make it. But as we're saying, the first thing you must do is acknowledge that it is not one size fits all. There are at least 10 different cognitive biases at work. And the extent to which you're able to understand it, engage with the individual, share thoughts with them, and gently start looking at alternatives to lead them out of this path. We're available to help you with this process. You can call us, you can fax us, you can email us, you can check our website, and we will be able to help working with individuals, working with small groups, working with large groups, walking through this process, this mental jiu-jitsu that is indeed important to transform anti-vaxxers. Our lives depend on this. Thank you.